She was once the perfect victim, her happiness stolen by another woman. Yet now, Lily finds herself teetering on the edge of becoming the very thing she once despised. All to win back Daniel, the man who betrayed and abandoned her. Is this the desperate act of a lonely heart, or the first calculated move in a dark, unseen game? She was the wronged wife. He was the cheating husband who left for his mistress. But when he returned, promising a new home and a fresh start, Lily let him back in. She thought it was a second chance at love. She was wrong. It was a meticulously laid trap. The dream house was a lie, and Lily was about to discover she wasn't his lost love. She was his next mark. The house without a wedding photo, a story about seeing through the illusion and the fight to reclaim your life. Disclaimer: this channel features fictional psychological stories created for emotional exploration and storytelling purposes. All characters and events are fictional. The gentle clatter of a spoon against a plastic bowl was the only music in the warm, yellow kitchen. Outside, a steady, whispering rain painted the world in streaks of silver and shadow. Lily leaned her hip against the counter, watching her 3-year-old daughter, Emma, wage a serious campaign against the last few peas on her plate. "All done, Mama," Emma declared, pushing the bowl away with a triumphant, green-smeared smile. "Good job, sweet pea," Lily said, her voice soft with the quiet contentment of their routine. This was their domain. The silence that filled the house was no longer an absence, but a presence, a calm, predictable one. The empty chair opposite her at the small table was just a chair. The doorbell's chime was a violent intrusion. Lily's head snapped up, a frown etching itself between her brows. 7:52 p.m. No one visited, not in this weather. A cold tendril of premonition curled in her stomach. "Stay right there, baby," she said, wiping her hands on her jeans as she moved toward the foyer. Her heart beat. A quiet drum a moment before began a slow, heavy thud against her ribs. She leaned toward the peephole, her eye meeting the distorted, fisheye lens of the world outside. And there he was. Daniel. Bent slightly against the damp, his good wool coat dark with moisture. His hair, usually so meticulously styled, was plastered to his forehead in dripping strands. In his arms he clutched a monstrous, cellophane-wrapped teddy bear, its cheerful pink bow wilting under the assault of the drizzle. He looked like a lost, rain-soaked salesman of regret. Her hand flew to her throat, fingers pressing against the sudden, frantic pulse there. 2 years of carefully constructed peace trembled like a sandcastle at the tide's edge. The bell rang again, a sharper, more pleading sound. A small, warm body collided with her legs before she could think, could breathe, could decide to turn away and pretend the world outside didn't exist. "Who is it?" Emma chirped, trying to peer through the sidelight window beside the door. "Emma, wait." Lily's protest was a choked whisper. But it was too late. Emma stood on tiptoes, her nose pressed to the glass. A gasp, then a sound that pierced straight through Lily's defenses. A pure, undiluted cry of joy. "Daddy! Daddy's home!" The words were a physical blow. Lily saw the reflection of her own stricken face in the dark window, superimposed over the image of her daughter's elation. Emma's little hands were splayed against the pane as if she could pull him through the glass. Her entire being vibrated with a hope so bright it was terrifying. To shut the door now would be to extinguish that light to be the villain in her own child's fairy tale. The lock felt heavy, cold under her trembling fingers. She turned it. The door swung inward, bringing with it a gust of damp, chilly air and the faint, achingly familiar scent of his cologne beneath the smell of wet wool. "Lily," Daniel said. His voice was rough, scraped raw. He offered a smile that was all weariness and apology, not reaching his shadowed eyes. God, I'm sorry to just show up. I missed her so much." His gaze, full of a calculated vulnerability, darted past her to where Emma was now jumping in place. "And I missed you." He proffered the giant bear like a white flag. A drop of water fell from its cellophane and landed with a soft pat on the entryway tile. Lily didn't move. She was a statue, holding the line between their past and her present. "Daniel, you can't do this. You can't just appear." But Emma was a force of nature, slipping past Lily's guard and latching onto Daniel's wet leg. "You're all wet, Daddy." The spell of resistance broke. "Come in," Lily heard herself say, the words flat and hollow. "Before you flood the hallway." He shuffled inside, a storm-tossed ghost haunting a home he'd abandoned. Lily moved on autopilot, fetching a clean towel from the hall closet. She thrust it at him, her fingers brushing his. The contact was electric and unpleasant, a jolt of a memory she'd tried to bury. "Bathroom's there if you need to dry off more thoroughly." "Thanks," he murmured, rubbing the towel over his head with a sigh that seemed to come from his bones. He shed his coat, revealing a rumpled dress shirt beneath. He looked softer like this, diminished. More like the man she'd fallen in love with, not the stranger who'd walked out. Emma seized his hand, pulling him into the living room, her chatter filling the space with a narrative about her day, her toys, the stubborn peas. Lily hovered in the archway, arms folded tightly across her chest, a silent witness. She watched him kneel on the carpet, his full attention on Emma. He laughed at a nonsensical joke, and the sound was so normal, so domestic, it carved a fresh ache in Lily's chest. This was the picture she'd once dreamed of. Now it felt like a theft. When Emma became engrossed in introducing her stuffed animals to the new giant bear, Daniel looked up. His eyes, in the soft lamplight, were wells of practiced misery. "It's a prison, Lily," he said, his voice low and confessional. "My life with Sophia." He ran a hand down his face, the picture of exhaustion. "It's all suspicion and rules. She monitors everything. Every text, every minute I'm late. There's no peace, no warmth." His gaze held hers, willing her to remember. "The only peace I find is when I think of here, of us, how it used to be." Lily remained silent, her jaw tight. She was searching his face, this man she'd once known better than herself, looking for the crack in the performance. "I kept remembering," he continued, a wistful smile touching his lips, "that time you had the flu so bad our first year here. You were shivering, miserable. I tried to make you your mom's chicken soup. I burned the first pot so badly we had to open all the windows in January." He gave a soft, self-deprecating chuckle. The second batch was too salty, but you ate every bite. You said it was the best thing you'd ever tasted. The memory ambushed her with sensory force. The ache in her bones, the chill she couldn't shake, and him, clumsy, worried, hers in their kitchen. The taste of that horribly salty soup had, inexplicably, been perfect. It had tasted like being cared for. Her crossed arms loosened just a fraction. The shield was slipping. The final, devastating maneuver came at bedtime. Emma nestled in the crook of Daniel's arm after a story, her eyelids fluttering, reached up and grabbed his thumb with her whole tiny hand. Her voice was a sleepy murmur. "Daddy, stay here tonight. Please, tell more stories tomorrow." Daniel's eyes lifted to meet Lily's over their daughter's head. There was no triumph in them, only a raw, beseeching hope, a silent plea for sanctuary, for a fragment of the comfort he claimed to have lost. In that suspended moment, Lily wasn't thinking of the legal documents, the lonely nights, or the woman named Sophia. She was drowning in the vast quiet of the house after Emma slept. She was staring at the empty chair that echoed. She was feeling the ghost of that salty soup on her tongue, and the deeper, more terrifying flavor of her own loneliness. Her own need rose up to meet his, a traitorous accomplice. She gave a single, stiff nod. It felt less like a decision and more like a surrender. "The sofa folds out," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "I'll get bedding." The breath Daniel released was a shudder of profound relief. He pressed a kiss to Emma's hair. "You hear that, monkey? Daddy's staying right here." As Lily turned and climbed the stairs, each step heavy, the low murmur of his voice continuing a nonsense story followed her, a siren's song pulling her back toward a rocky shore. She had opened the door. She had let the ghost in. And now, standing in the hallway with a pile of clean linens in her arms that smelled of lavender and normalcy, she felt the first cold trickle of dread seep into the fragile warmth of the life she'd built. He had won the first move. Lily woke to the smell of coffee and the soft, sizzling sound of something cooking. For a disorienting second, she thought she was caught in a memory, one from years ago, warm and sun-drenched. Then the present rushed back in, the pull-out couch in the living room, Daniel's unexpected presence, the dangerous thaw in her own defenses. She found him in the kitchen, bathed in the pale morning light filtering through the rain-cleansed window. He was wearing the same jeans from last night and one of his old college t-shirts she'd never thrown out. He moved with a quiet, familiar efficiency, wiping down the counter, flipping golden pancakes on the griddle, humming a tuneless snippet of a song she didn't recognize. The scene was a perfect, devastating forgery of their past. "Morning," he said, flashing her a smile that was all easy charm, no trace of last night's rain-soaked desperation. "Hope you were hungry. Emma's already on her third mini pancake." He nodded toward the small table where their daughter sat, a look of syrup-coated bliss on her face. "Daddy made stars and hearts," Emma announced, holding up a misshapen, charred-at-the-edges heart. "He did," Lily murmured, her voice still thick with sleep and confusion. She watched as Daniel set a plate down for her. 2 perfect, golden brown pancakes, a pat of butter melting into a small lake, just the way she used to like it. The domesticity of the gesture was a hook, catching deep in her chest. This was the script she'd memorized and then tried to burn. Her loneliness, a constant, hollow companion, gazed at this picture and sighed with longing. "Aren't you expected elsewhere?" she asked carefully, pouring herself a cup of the coffee he'd made. It was perfect, too. How did he remember? Daniel's smile dimmed. Just a fraction. "I called in sick, and I need to be here right now, with my family." He didn't say Sophia. He didn't have to. The omission hung in the air, a shared, intimate secret. "I just want a few days to remember what matters." The illusion was warm, and Lily, shivering from the cold of 2 solitary years, leaned into it. She allowed the morning to unfold, the sticky cleanup, Emma's laughter as Daniel pretended the dish sponge was a talking creature, the way he instinctively reached for the trash bag under the sink without being asked. It felt like slipping into a favorite, worn-out sweater that no longer fit quite right but was comforting nonetheless. The first crack in the perfect veneer appeared mid-morning. Daniel headed for the shower, leaving his phone face down on the coffee table. Lily was gathering Emma's scattered crayons when it vibrated, skittering half an inch across the wood with a loud, angry buzz. Her eyes flicked to the screen. The caller ID flashed. Mom. Oh, not Sophia. Mom. Daniel's mother. A cold trickle of reality seeped through the warm fog. Why would his mother be calling on a weekday morning? And why did the sight of that simple, familial name feel like a warning? Before she could dissect the feeling, the shower stopped. She quickly turned away, her heart beating a little faster, as if she'd been caught snooping. Later, as Emma napped, Daniel leaned against the kitchen doorway. "Let's do something. All of us. Let's go to the park, get some air." He said it like a gift. I took a few personal days to focus on what's important. And so they went. Maple Grove Park was drenched in afternoon sun. Daniel pushed Emma on the swing, her squeals of "Higher, Daddy" piercing the air. He chased her across the grass, catching her and tossing her gently into a pile of autumn leaves. Lily watched, her phone in her hand, but she wasn't scrolling. She was a spectator to her own fantasy, feeling like both a participant and a fraud. "Come here," Daniel called, holding up his own phone. "Family picture." The word family hit her like a soft blow. She hesitated, then walked over, standing stiffly beside him as Emma wriggled between them. He stretched out his arm, snapping photo after photo. In them, they looked normal, whole. A beautiful lie captured in pixels. On the walk back to the car, Emma ran a few paces ahead, chasing a squirrel. The space between Lily and Daniel hummed with a new, charged silence. Then, his hand, brushing against hers not once, but twice. The third time his fingers laced through hers, warm and sure. Lily froze. Every cell in her body screamed to pull away, to reclaim the distance that was her salvation. But her hand, traitorously, stayed. It was just a hand. But it was a anchor, a connection to a shore she'd been drifting from for so long. The simple physical contact was an antidote to a loneliness so profound she'd almost stopped feeling it. She let her fingers curl slightly, just enough to feel the solidity of his. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. that evening held a dangerous, honeyed peace. Daniel bathed Emma, a task he'd rarely done before, and read her 3 bedtime stories. From the hallway, Lily listened to the low rumble of his voice, the soft giggles of her daughter. It sounded like home. It felt like a healing. After Emma's breathing deepened into the rhythms of sleep, Lily stood in the dim living room, straightening cushions, needing to move, to do something with the nervous energy coiling inside her. She heard his quiet footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. His arms came around her waist, gently, pulling her back against his chest. She stiffened, a final, weak alarm ringing in the back of her mind. His chin rested on her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. "We belong together, Lily," he whispered, his voice a low vibration she felt in her bones. "You know we do. All of it. Leaving. Her. It was all just a terrible mistake." The words were the final solvent, dissolving the last brittle remnants of her resolve. They were the affirmation her bruised heart had craved. A tear escaped, tracing a hot path down her cheek. She leaned back just an inch, surrendering her weight to him. He turned her then, slowly. In the half-light, his face was all shadows and tender regret. He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away the tear. His gaze dropped to her lips. The kiss wasn't fierce or passionate. It was soft. A question. A homecoming. It tasted of coffee and pancake syrup and the ghost of every dream she'd ever forced herself to forget. Her hands, which had hung limply at her sides, came up to clutch the fabric of his t-shirt, not to push away, but to hold on. When it ended, she was breathless, unmoored. She had just crossed a line there was no uncrossing, the final barrier, the one built on pride and survival, lay in ruins at her feet. She had let the enemy inside the gates, and in the warm, desperate darkness, she could no longer remember why he was the enemy at all. A strange new rhythm settled into the house, one that felt borrowed from a parallel, happier universe. Daniel's suitcase, once a shocking intrusion, now stood open and half unpacked as in a corner of the guest room, which had subtly morphed into his room. His aftershave lingered in the bathroom. His work shoes sat neatly by the door next to Lily's sneakers and Emma's tiny rain boots. The apartment, which had been a sanctuary for 2, now stretched to accommodate a third with an ease that terrified Lily even as she craved it. She was drunk on it, drunk on waking up to the smell of the coffee he'd already brewed, on the sound of him making Emma giggle during breakfast, on the simple, terrifying comfort of not being alone. The kiss in the dark had broken a dam, and a flood of old hopes and new fantasies rushed in to fill the emptiness. It was over a dinner he cooked, her favorite pasta, carbonara, that he unveiled the grand plan. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "This place is full of ghosts, Lil," he said, his voice earnest, his eyes holding hers. "Our old fights, the sadness, and it's small. I've been thinking." He squeezed her hand. "We should sell. You, me, and Emma. We pool everything, get a real down payment. A house with a yard for Emma. A fresh start on our own terms. A home that's just us, with no shadow of anyone else. A house." The word shimmered in the air between them, solid and permanent. It was the antithesis of a temporary couch. It was a flag planted in the future. Emma, picking at her peas, chanted, "A house, a yard, a swing." Lily's breath caught. The careful, independent life she'd built, the one defined by a mortgage she could just manage, by quiet evenings, by survival, suddenly seemed small and sad in comparison to this brilliant, expansive dream he was painting. He was offering her a script where she wasn't a struggling single mother, but the co-star of a comeback story. The loneliness that had been her constant companion whispered that this was the cure. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, already wanting to be convinced. "I've never been more sure of anything," Daniel said, his gaze unwavering. "After you, I never really loved anyone. Not truly. Us. It's the only real thing." The lie was beautiful, wrapped in the promise of a white picket fence. Lily, swimming in the heady wine of his attention and her own desperate hope, nodded. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." The words felt like stepping off a cliff, but the air beneath her wings felt exhilarating. The next afternoon, Daniel announced he was meeting a real estate agent friend for coffee. "Scouting the market," he said, dropping a kiss on her forehead, "for our future." After he left, the apartment felt too quiet, charged with the energy of their new, momentous decision. Needing to do something, to be an active participant in this fresh start, Lily decided to tidy the guest room. She would make it properly his, a stepping stone to the house. She straightened the sheets on the pull-out couch, folded a stray sweater. In the bottom drawer of the small desk, buried under a few old printer cables and a pad of sticky notes, her fingers brushed against cold, hard plastic. She pulled out an older model smartphone, its screen dark and dusty. Daniel must have tossed it in there and forgotten about it. It was probably dead. Without much thought, driven by a practical urge to consolidate chargers, she took it to the kitchen, found a compatible cord, and plugged it in. A red battery icon flickered to life on the black screen. She went back to dusting. A few minutes later, a distinctive chime, the old phone's startup sound, echoed from the kitchen counter. Lily walked over, intending to just shut it off and put it away. The screen glowed, displaying a lock screen photo of a generic mountain landscape. No personal touch. She swiped, expecting a password prompt. There was none. He'd never set one, or had removed it. Her thumb hovered over the messaging icon. A cold, slithering feeling, separate from the warm buzz of her hopefulness, stirred in her gut. "Don't," a voice whispered. "You have your future. Don't look back." But her finger tapped the icon. The message list loaded. Most were spam, a few from old work groups. And then a thread, a name, Chloe. The preview of the last message from her read, "Miss you already. Can't wait for next weekend." The date stamp was from 4 months ago. Lily's heart, so full of dreams a moment before, gave a hard, painful thud. She opened the thread. The messages scrolled up, a sickening tapestry. Him. "You light up the whole room. Never met anyone like you." Her. Sending a winking emoji, then a photo. A selfie of a blonde woman in a cocktail dress, smiling over her shoulder. Him. Stunning, counting the hours, plans for dinners, for drinks. Him complaining about his nagging, suspicious wife. Sophia. Chloe sympathizing. The flirting was blatant, familiar in its cadence. It was the same tone he'd used with Lily in their early days, the same script of admiration and shared victimhood. The timeline was the knife. The messages peaked in intensity, and then stopped abruptly about 3 months ago, right before Daniel had shown up, rain-soaked and full of regret, on her doorstep. The phone slipped from Lily's numb fingers, clattering onto the tile countertop. The sound was obscenely loud in the silent kitchen. She didn't pick it up. She simply slid down the face of the cabinet until she was sitting on the cold kitchen floor, her back against the wood, legs splayed out. The world shrank to the pattern of the linoleum, and the cold seeping through her jeans. Daniel's voice echoed in her head from just last night, warm and convincing. After you, I never really loved anyone. Not truly. The lie was no longer abstract. It had a name. It had a face in a cocktail dress. It had weekend plans and pet names. A visceral pain seized her chest, a physical squeezing that made it hard to breathe. But alongside the heartbreak, something else flickered. Cold, clear, and sharp. It was the voice of the woman who had learned to unclog drains, to read bedtime stories alone, to balance a budget for two. The survivor who had been sedated by fantasy was now being shocked awake. Her eyes, dry and wide, fixed on the discarded phone on the counter. The question formed not as a sob, but as a silent, damning sentence in her mind. Was I just the next option after Chloe didn't work out? The cold from the kitchen floor had seeped into Lily's bones, but it had also crystallized something inside her. The shock didn't melt into tears. It hardened into a sharp, cold focus. Picking herself up, she unplugged the old phone, wiped it clean of her fingerprints, and placed it back exactly where she'd found it. Her hands, which had trembled moments before, were now steady. The heartbroken woman was shoved into a locked room. The survivor took the wheel. When Daniel returned, full of talk of square footage and good school districts, Lily met him with a smile. It felt strange on her face, like wearing a mask she'd forgotten how to shape. But she wore it. "That sounds amazing," she said, her voice laced with a convincing note of dreamy excitement. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder as he scrolled through listings on his laptop. A fresh start. I love it. She became the perfect, trusting partner. She agreed with his ideas. She laughed at his jokes a beat too quickly. She made his favorite meals. She initiated affection. A touch on his arm, a quick kiss as she passed by, not because she wanted to, but because it was what the character of the reconciled, hopeful Lily would do. Every gesture was a data point. Every conversation was an interrogation disguised as pillow talk. She watched. She noticed the new things. He was always on his main phone, but with the screen tilted subtly away. He'd developed a sudden, dedicated interest in mindfulness. At precisely 9:30 p.m., he would announce, "Time to unplug and meditate for a bit. Clear the head for tomorrow," and would power down his phone, placing it screen down on the nightstand. The ritual was as regular as clockwork. Before, she'd thought it was a new, healthy habit. Now, she saw it for what it was, a curtain going down on Act 1 of his day, so Act 2 could begin elsewhere. One evening, after he'd gone into the shower, the sound of the water a steady hiss, Lily moved. Her heart was a cold, hard stone in her chest, not fluttering with nerves, but beating a slow, deliberate rhythm of purpose. She picked up his phone from the nightstand. The screen lit up, demanding a passcode. Emma. Everything with Daniel was a performance, and his favorite role was devoted dad. She typed in their daughter's birthday. The phone unlocked. A wave of nausea, hot and acidic, rose in her throat, but she swallowed it down. This wasn't about emotion. It was about evidence. She went straight to his Maps app, to the timeline feature he'd never bothered to disable. She scrolled back through the previous weeks. There were trips to work, to the realtor's office, to home. And then, on several evenings, a recurring pin dropped at a place called the Velvet Rope Lounge in the city's trendy warehouse district. The visits coincided perfectly with his meditation hours. She locked the phone, placed it back at the exact same angle, and walked away, her bare feet silent on the carpet. She felt nothing but a chilling clarity. The next day, she called Maya, her oldest friend. "I need a huge favor. Can you take Emma for a sleepover? I have a work thing." The lie was smooth, effortless. She was learning from a master. That evening, she dressed not to be seen, but to be invisible. Dark jeans, a plain black sweater, hair tucked under a beanie. She drove to the warehouse district, her grip on the steering wheel tight and dry. The Velvet Rope Lounge was all exposed brick and low, amber lighting. From the doorway, she scanned the dim interior. Couples huddled at tables, groups laughed at the bar. And then, in a secluded booth in the back corner, she saw him. Daniel. He was wearing the dark blue sweater she'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. He had one arm slung casually along the back of the booth. Curled into his side, her hand resting on his chest, was the blonde woman from the phone selfie. Chloe. She was laughing, throwing her head back, then leaning in to say something that made Daniel smile. A lazy, intimate smile Lily hadn't seen in years. He wasn't just carrying on an old affair. He was actively cultivating it, watering it in this dark corner, while the garden at home was being prepared for a fake spring. He was living 2 full lives simultaneously, and Lily's was the one with the mortgage discussions and the pancake breakfasts. The real thing. She didn't move. She didn't gasp or cry. She simply stood there, a shadow in the doorway, and let the image burn itself onto her retinas. The way Chloe's fingers played with the fabric of his sweater, the way he leaned in to hear her over the music, the complete, unguarded ease of their bodies together. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a fact. Solid and grotesque, Lily turned and walked out. The night air was cool, but it felt hot in her lungs. She got into her car, her hands now beginning to shake, not with sadness, but with a pure, undiluted adrenaline of rage. She gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white, the tremors vibrating up her arms. But the anger wasn't chaotic. It was a cold, clean fire, burning away the last wisps of the hopeful fog she'd been lost in. The pain was gone, incinerated. In its place was a profound, soul-deep disgust, not just for him, but for herself, for the willing, love-starved puppet she had become. As she drove away, the neon sign of the lounge reflecting in her rearview mirror. The final, horrifying metaphor clicked into place. She wasn't living a love story. She wasn't even living a tragedy. She was living in a cheap, badly directed play. Daniel was the ham-fisted director, moving her set pieces around. The loving ex-wife, the adorable child, the dream house, while he sneaked off to enjoy the real show in the wings. And she had been his star performer, reciting lines of forgiveness and hope on a stage built over a pit of lies. The puppet had seen the strings, and now she was going to cut every single one of them. The performance continued, but Lily was no longer just an actor. She was the director of her own counter-investigation. She carried the image from the Velvet Rope Lounge like a cold stone in her pocket, waiting for the right moment to throw it. That moment came after dinner, as Daniel was loading the dishwasher, another of his newly perfected, devoted routines. Lily leaned against the kitchen island, her voice deceptively casual. "Maya mentioned she saw you last night, said you were at some bar downtown. The Velvet Rope sounded fancy." She kept her eyes on her wineglass, tracing the rim with a finger. Daniel's hands stilled on a plate. For a fraction of a second, his back went rigid. Then he turned, his face a masterpiece of wounded confusion. "The Velvet Rope? Oh, right. Yeah, I was meeting a friend from my old firm, Chloe. You remember me mentioning her?" Lily gave a non-committal hum. "Not really. She's had a total meltdown," he continued, his tone shifting to one of grave concern. He closed the dishwasher and walked toward her, his expression open, earnest. "Bad breakup, job trouble. She called in a panic. What was I supposed to do? I just met her for a drink to talk her off a ledge. It was a crisis intervention, Lily, not a date." He reached for her hand, his eyes searching hers. You don't actually think I'd do something like that, do you? After everything we're rebuilding?" The pivot was masterful. The accusation was no longer about his infidelity, but about her lack of trust. He was the good Samaritan, and she was the suspicious, petty partner threatening their fragile new bond. The emotional calculus was designed to make her back down, to feel guilty for doubting him. Lily let the silence hang, watching the subtle play of anxiety in his eyes. He mistook her scrutiny for doubt. "You need proof? You want to see how serious I am about us?" he said, his voice dropping to a passionate whisper. He strode to the guest room and returned moments later with a folded sheet of paper. He handed it to her as if presenting a holy relic. "I started the paperwork. For us." Lily unfolded it. It was a draft of a petition for dissolution of marriage. The parties listed were Daniel Michael Thorne and Sophia Elise Thorne. Her eyes scanned the legalese, her heart giving a treacherous, hopeful lurch against her will. Proof. He's leaving her. It's royal. But then her gaze fell to the signature line for respondent. Sophia's name was scrawled there in a loopy, almost childish cursive. It looked off. Too neat, yet simultaneously awkward, as if someone had practiced it but lacked the muscle memory. It didn't match the sharp, confident signature she'd seen years ago on a joint Christmas card. A fissure opened in her momentary hope. "She already signed?" Lily asked, keeping her voice flat. "Well, it's a draft. She's seen it. She agrees in principle. We're working out the details," Daniel said, waving a hand. "The important thing is the intent, Lily. My intent is here, with you and Emma. This house, our future, that's my priority. Lily nodded slowly, folding the paper with exaggerated care. I see. She managed a small wobbly smile. It's a big step. The only step, he affirmed, pulling her into a hug. She rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes wide open and cold over his back. Later that night, she waited until his breathing deepened into sleep. She retrieved the folded petition from her purse and, in the blue glow of her phone, took several clear, close-up photographs of the entire document, especially the signature. She sent them to Rachel, a college friend who was now a family law attorney, with a simple text. Need your professional eyeballs on this ASAP. Something feels off. Coffee tomorrow? The next afternoon, sitting across from Rachel in a quiet corner of a cafe, Lily watched her friend's face grow increasingly grim as she studied the photos on her tablet. Lily, Rachel began, her professional mask slipping to reveal concern. Where did you get this? He gave it to me. As proof he's divorcing Sophia. Rachel let out a slow breath. Okay. First, this is very much a draft. It's not been filed with any court. It's worth less than the paper it's printed on, legally speaking. Second, she zoomed in on the signature. I've seen a lot of signatures. This one, it lacks flow. See these hesitations here and here? It looks traced or deliberately copied. I'd be highly suspicious it's forged. Even if it's not, the fact that he's presenting this unsigned, unfiled draft as some kind of grand gesture, it feels manipulative. Like he's trying to scare you into compliance or give you just enough hope to keep you on the hook. The words landed with the finality of a judge's gavel. The last prop in Daniel's shoddy play had been examined and found to be made of cardboard. A cold, definitive calm settled over Lily. There was only one source of truth left. Back in her car, her fingers were icy but steady as she pulled up a number she had never thought she'd dial. A number she'd found buried in old emails. She hit call. It rang 3 times. Hello? The voice was guarded, elegant, and tired. Sophia? This is Lily. Lily Thorne. Well, Evans now. She took a sharp breath. I'm sorry to call you like this. I need to ask you something directly. Is Daniel filing for divorce? There was a long, heavy silence on the line. Lily could almost hear the other woman's weary calculation. Then a sound came through, a short, dry, humorless laugh that was more exhausted than bitter. Divorce, Sophia's voice was laced with a profound, cynical fatigue. Let me tell you what Daniel is doing. He's begging me for money, again, to cover gambling debts I didn't even know he still had. I give it to him sometimes because I don't need the harassment and my son doesn't need the drama. But divorce? No. We're in a very expensive, very dysfunctional holding pattern. She paused, and when she spoke again, her tone was almost pitying. So, he came back to you, did he? Let me guess, with promises and a plan. Listen to me. He's not with you because of love. He's with you because he needs something. A place to stay, a distraction, a bank account, a soft landing until the next Chloe comes along. It's never about love. It's always about what you can do for him. The line went dead. Lily sat in the driver's seat, the phone still pressed to her ear, listening to the dial tone that echoed Sophia's final, devastating truth. The last illusion didn't shatter. It evaporated, leaving behind a stark empty landscape where only one thing was real, the enemy she was living with. The dial tone in Lily's ear was the sound of one world ending and a much colder, clearer one beginning. Sophia's words. "It's never about love. It's always about what you can do for him," echoed in the silent car, not as an insult, but as a foundational truth. Bleak and undeniable. Minutes later, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Sophia. We should talk." Thus began the most unlikely alliance. Two women, connected only by their shared victimization at the hands of the same man, began to strip Daniel bare, layer by toxic layer. Their communication was terse, factual, devoid of the catty rivalry he'd probably imagined. They were forensic accountants of his deceit. The picture that emerged was a study in pathetic predatory calculation. Sophia. He was laid off from Hartman Financial 4 months ago. They called it a restructuring. His boss told me it was performance-related. He never told you, did he? Lily's blood ran cold. 4 months ago. The timeline clicked with sickening precision. The ramping up with Chloe, then the abrupt end. His sudden, desperate reappearance on her rainy doorstep. He wasn't seeking shelter from a storm of emotion. He was seeking shelter, period. Lily. No. He said he was taking personal days. He talks about a big real estate investment, wants me to sell my apartment and pool resources. Sophia. Don't you dare. The car he's driving is a lease I'm paying for. The investment is a fantasy, or a lie to access your capital. Check his phone for betting apps. Draft, Kings, FanDuel. Later, when Daniel was in the shower, Lily did. They were there, hidden in a folder named Utilities. Accounts overdrawn, alerts demanding payment. The amounts made her stomach lurch. Sophia. The girl, Chloe, she's a junior loan officer at First Metropolitan. He met her networking. I think he was trying to sweet-talk her into a personal loan. Piece by damning piece, the mosaic of his true life assembled itself on Lily's screen. The devoted father, the repentant ex-husband, the visionary planner, every mask had a crumbling, ugly face beneath it. He was unemployed, indebted, driving a car another woman paid for, and juggling 2 others, at least, to maintain the charade and potentially fund it. The final, definitive proof arrived as a PDF attachment from Sophia the next morning. The subject line was simply, "For your records." It was a scanned bank statement from a joint account Daniel and Sophia still shared. For their son's expenses, she explained. Lily's eyes tracked down the transactions. Small drains at first, then larger ones. ATM withdrawals at casinos. Electronic transfers to sportsbooks. And then, 2 months ago, a single, massive withdrawal that bled the account dry. The date was 1 week before Daniel had first mentioned the Fresh Start house idea to Lily. Sophia. He cleaned it out. I had to cover our son's tuition from my personal account. He's a parasite, Lily. He came back to you because he knows. He knows about the inheritance from your aunt, doesn't he? The one you got last year. He always had a nose for money he didn't earn. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. She'd mentioned the inheritance, a modest but life-easing sum she'd put into a CD for Emma's future. Only once, in a moment of foolish, hopeful transparency early in his return. She'd seen it as sharing a future. He'd seen it as a target. That was the core of it. The love was a fiction. The family was a prop. She was a line of credit with an emotional collateral he knew exactly how to manipulate. That evening, Daniel was extra attentive. He'd brought home takeout from her favorite Thai place. He was talking about getting pre-approved for a mortgage, his eyes bright with fabricated excitement. Lily watched him, this handsome, hollow man animated by a script of his own making. The performance that had once captivated her now seemed grotesque and transparent, like watching a child in a too-big costume. "You're quiet tonight," he said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "Just tired," she murmured, offering a thin smile. "It's a lot to think about." Later, after he'd fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted by his own performance, Lily sat at her kitchen table. Spread before her was not a chaotic mess, but a neat, damning dossier. Her phone with the text threads with Sophia, screenshots of the betting app alerts, the photo of the fake divorce petition, the PDF of the bank statement. She felt no rage, no heartbreak. The storm of emotions had passed, leaving behind a vast Arctic calm. A deep, pervasive cold settled in her bones, but it was clarifying. It froze the last of the confusion and pain. Her gaze moved from the evidence to the doorway of the living room, where she could hear his soft snore. And the feeling that rose, surprising in its purity, was pity. She pitied herself. The woman so starved for a fairy tale that she'd nearly handed a wolf the keys to the kingdom. She saw her own loneliness, her desperate hope, with a detached, almost clinical sadness. And more shockingly, she pitied him, Daniel, the man who had to construct elaborate, exhausting lies just to get through the day, who saw relationships as transactions, love as a tool, and his own child as a useful prop, who was, at his core, not a master manipulator, but a profoundly broken, pathetic creature. A parasite, as Sophia said, constantly searching for a new host because he could not sustain himself. All his charm, his plans, his promises, were just the flailing of a drowning man trying to pull everyone else under with him. The fear was gone. The love was gone. Even the anger had burned down to cold ash. All that remained was this clear, cold pity and the absolute certainty of what she had to do next. The game was over. Now came the eviction. The cold pity that had filled Lily solidified into a plan. Revenge was a messy, emotional business. What she needed was a surgical extraction. She would not scream or cry. She would simply dismantle his fantasy, brick by legal brick, until he had no choice but to slink away to his next mark. She became a strategist in her own home. Her first move was invisible. Sitting across from Rachel at the same cafe, Lily laid out her objectives. I need him gone, permanently. I need to protect Emma, and I need to protect what's mine. No drama, just finality. Rachel nodded, her fingers flying over her tablet. First, evidence. Get him on record admitting to the financial plan. Don't accuse, just encourage him to brag. Second, lock down your assets. Today. Third, we prepare the legal countermeasures. He's already overplaying his hand. The next morning, Lily went to her bank alone. With calm, deliberate motions, she authorized the transfer of the entire inheritance from her aunt and the bulk of her savings into a new individual account at a different institution. The money for Emma's future was now behind a firewall he could never breach. The action felt more empowering than any kiss ever had. Back home, she activated the voice memo app on her phone and placed it face down on the kitchen counter, partially obscured by a fruit bowl, as she prepared lunch. "I was looking at the numbers again for the house," she said, her voice laced with artful worry. She chopped carrots, not looking at him. "My equity, plus what you said you could contribute, it's a huge leap." I need to hear you say it's real, that this divorce from Sophia is happening, and that this investment is solid, for Emma's sake." Daniel, smelling victory, pounced on her doubt. He came up behind her, his voice a warm, confident purr in her ear. "It's more than real, baby. It's our future. Sophia's being difficult, but the papers are drafted. And this real estate play? It's a sure thing. My guy on the inside says the value will double in 2 years. Pooling our resources is the smartest thing we'll ever do." He spoke of joint accounts and combined assets with the slick certainty of a late-night infomercial host. The phone on the counter quietly captured every word. Later, Rachel provided the documents. One was a draft parenting plan and limited visitation agreement, which severely restricted Daniel's parental rights to supervised visitation only, citing a pattern of instability and deceit. The other was a skeleton complaint for fraud, ready to be filed if he escalated. They were not weapons Lily wanted to use, but shields she needed to have. The bait was set a few days later. Lily fidgeted with her necklace, a sign of nervousness she'd practiced. "Daniel, the realtor called. They need a good faith cash deposit to secure the lot we talked about. Just 5,000. But with all the bills, I'm stretched. Do you have access to that?" Daniel's face underwent a subtle transformation, a flash of panic quickly masked by smooth reassurance. "The deposit? Right, of course. I can cover it, but my liquidity is tied up in the closing paperwork with Sophia. It's a temporary bottleneck." He took her hands, his eyes wide with manufactured excitement. "What if you front it? Just a short-term loan. The moment my funds clear, which will be any day, I'll pay you back. With interest, double. Think of it as our first investment together." Lily feigned hesitant relief. "You promise? I'd feel better if we had something on paper, just so it's clear for my own records." Daniel laughed, a sound of indulgent triumph. "Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable." He scrawled his signature on the simple promissory note she produced, not even reading the clear, unambiguous language that stated the $1,000 was a personal loan from Lily Evans to Daniel Thorne for investment purposes. To him, it was a meaningless piece of paper, a pantomime to placate her. To her and Rachel, it was a written admission of his intent to use her funds under false pretenses. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel pulled Lily onto the couch, wrapping her in an embrace that once felt like safety and now felt like a cage woven from lies. He nuzzled her hair, his voice a contented murmur against her temple. "Almost there, sweetheart," he whispered, the endearment tasting like ash in Lily's mind. "Our fresh start, our new house, it's all coming together." Lily allowed herself to be held. She didn't stiffen or pull away. She rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady, deceiving beat of his heart. She stared straight ahead, her eyes wide-o open and unblinking in the dim room, fixed on the blank, dark television screen. And slowly, in the shadows where he couldn't see, her lips curved. It wasn't a smile of joy or love. It was a cold, razor-thin expression of absolute readiness. The puppet master was asleep, dreaming of his triumph, completely unaware that the puppet had not only cut her strings, but was now holding the shears to his. Lily sat at the kitchen table, a cup of cold coffee untouched before her. The morning sun streamed in, illuminating the dust motes in the air, the crumbs from Emma's breakfast toast, the ordinary details of a life he had tried to hijack. She waited, perfectly still, as Daniel bustled about, putting on his suit jacket, the costume for a job he no longer had. He was about to head for the door, to begin another day of his elaborate fiction, when her voice stopped him. It was calm, flat, devoid of its usual morning warmth. Sophia's money ran out, Lily said, not looking at him, her gaze fixed on the garden outside the window. So you needed mine. And Chloe, she was a loan officer, wasn't she? She said no to the loan. That's when you came back here. The silence that followed was absolute and profound. The cheerful whistling he'd been faking died in his throat. She heard the soft shush of his wool jacket sleeve as he slowly turned. When she finally looked at him, his face was a canvas of rapidly shifting emotions. Shock first, bleaching the color from his skin. Then, a flicker of fear in his widened eyes. Finally, it hardened into a mask of outraged indignation. His jaw tightened. "You've been investigating me," he spat, the word laced with disgust. He took a step toward the table, his posture aggressive, trying to reclaim the higher ground through intimidation. "You're listening to that bitter, crazy woman over me after everything I've done to rebuild this family?" Lily didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply reached for her phone, which lay on the table next to her coffee cup. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. She tapped the screen, found the audio file, and pressed play. His own voice filled the kitchen, oily with false confidence. "Pooling our resources is the smartest thing we'll ever do. Sophia's being difficult, but the papers are drafted, a sure thing." Daniel's aggressive stance faltered. His eyes darted from the phone to her face, the rage melting into dawning panic. Lily stopped the recording. She then slid a single sheet of paper across the table. The promissory note for $5,000, his flamboyant signature at the bottom. Next, she placed her phone down again, this time displaying the clear, damning photo of him with Chloe at the Velvet Rope Lounge, his arm around her, his smile easy and intimate. Finally, she laid down the printed PDF of the bank statement Sophia had sent, the massive, account-clearing withdrawal highlighted in yellow. "You have 3 seconds to choose," Lily said, her voice still that terrifying, even monotone. "You can sit down, and we can have the only honest conversation we've ever had. Or I call the police right now and file a report for attempted fraud and financial exploitation." The recording, the promissory note obtained under false pretenses, and the testimony of your current wife will be more than enough to start. She didn't count. She just looked at him, her eyes like chips of winter ice. The transformation was instantaneous and complete. The bluster, the charm, the wounded righteousness, it all evaporated, sloughing off him like a snake's discarded skin. His shoulders slumped. The fine wool of his suit seemed to hang on a suddenly shrunken frame. He didn't sit so much as collapse into the chair opposite her, his body folding in on itself. For a moment, he just stared at the evidence arrayed before him, the compiled ledger of his lies. Then, a dry, choked sound escaped him. He buried his face in his hands and his shoulders began to shake. When he looked up, his eyes were red, swimming in pathetic tears. I was wrong. Lily, God, I was so wrong, he choked out, his voice breaking with a sob he'd probably practiced in front of a mirror for other occasions. He reached a trembling hand across the table, but she didn't move hers an inch. I was so scared of losing you forever. I did stupid, desperate things because I love you so much. I'm sick. I need help. He was giving the performance of his life, but the audience was no longer buying tickets. Lily watched him, this man who had once been the axis of her world. She felt nothing but a vast, weary pity and a final, crystallized disgust. Daniel, she said, and her voice held the quiet, absolute finality of a judge pronouncing a sentence. Stop. Just stop. You don't know how to love anyone. You only love yourself and what you can take from people. This show is over. The words hung in the sunlit kitchen, severing the last frayed thread of their history. The man across from her wasn't a villain in a grand tragedy anymore. He was just a sad, hollow con artist who'd run out of tricks, sitting amidst the ruins of his own pathetic deceptions. The mask was off, and there was nothing admirable or even frightening underneath. Only a void. The silence in the kitchen after Lily's pronouncement was thick, broken only by Daniel's ragged, theatrical breathing. The tears on his cheeks were real. Tears of self-pity, of a plan collapsing. But they sparked no empathy in her, only a distant, clinical observation. He was waiting for the next scene, the reconciliation, the forgiveness he could manipulate. Lily was writing a different ending. She reached into a folder beside her chair and laid 3 documents on the table, one after the other, the soft thwip of paper the only sound. This is how we end it, she said, her voice devoid of negotiation. Clean. Final. He stared at the papers as if they were poisoned. One, Lily began, tapping the first document. You sign this revised parenting plan. You retain the legal title of father, but all physical and legal custody remains with me. You are entitled to supervised visitation once a month in a public place with me present. No overnights. No unscheduled contact. Daniel's head jerked up, a flash of the old defiance in his red-rimmed eyes. You can't keep me from my daughter. I can, and I will, Lily interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. Your pattern of instability, deceit, and financial fraud, documented right here. She gestured to the evidence pile. Gives me more than enough grounds. This is a courtesy. The alternative is a lengthy, ugly court battle where all of this, another gesture, becomes public record. You will lose, and you will get nothing. He deflated, the fight draining out of him as quickly as it had come. 2, she continued, moving to the second page. You will pay the state-mandated minimum child support. I am not asking for more. I do not want your money. I want the legal obligation fulfilled, on time, every month. It is not for me. It is for Emma. He gave a slight, defeated nod. 3. Her finger landed on the final document, a simple, bullet-pointed agreement she had drafted with Rachel. You disappear. You do not contact me unless it is a logistical, written message regarding the monthly visit, confirmed 72 hours in advance. You do not come near my home, my workplace, or Emma's daycare. You vanish. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze pinning him to his chair. If you violate any of these terms, if you stop payments, if you show up unannounced, if you so much as send a manipulative text, the entire dossier goes out. To your former employers at Hartman Financial, to your parents, to my parents, to the police with a formal fraud complaint, and in a detailed, anonymized post on every local community forum and social media group I can find. Your reputation, what's left of it, will be ash. The threat was not delivered with heat, but with the chilling certainty of a sworn oath. She was not a scorned woman making wild promises. She was a general stating the terms of surrender. Daniel looked from her cold, resolved face to the damning papers on the table. He saw no loophole, no room for his signature charm. He had been outmaneuvered completely, his shoulders slumped in a final, total capitulation. Wordlessly, he pulled a pen from his jacket pocket. The scratching of the pen was loud in the quiet room. He signed the parenting plan. He initialed each clause of the disappearance agreement. He signed a formal acknowledgement of the child support order. Each signature was a little slower, a little less flamboyant than the one on the promissory note, as if the life was being signed out of him. He packed his things in a single, worn duffel bag, the same one he'd arrived with. The process took less than 20 minutes. He had brought so little of himself into this house, only props for his performance. At the door he paused, looking back at her with one last, pitiful attempt at a meaningful glance. Lily stood in the center of the living room, arms crossed, waiting for the door to close. She did not say goodbye. When the lock finally clicked into place, the sound echoed through the apartment. It wasn't a silence of absence, but a silence of presence regained. The air itself seemed to change, to lighten, as if a heavy, toxic fog had been vented out. Lily let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. A long, slow, shuddering exhalation that left her feeling hollowed out, but astonishingly light. She walked through the rooms. The guest room, stripped of his few things, was just a guest room again. The couch was folded back into a sofa. The kitchen was just a kitchen, but the whole place felt different. The beautiful, carefully curated apartment she had built for her small family now felt like what it had nearly become. A set. A beautiful, empty stage for a play that had closed on opening night. She took out her phone. She didn't take a selfie. She walked through the sun-drenched rooms, capturing wide-angle shots of the pristine, empty spaces, the clean countertops, the vacant guest room, the perfect, unused balcony. The pictures were beautiful and profoundly sad. Opening a popular local real estate forum, she began to type. Must sell, brand new, never lived in dream apartment. Top floor, great light, move-in ready. Reason for selling. My daughter and I discovered we don't need a perfect set. We need a real home. Priority to a happy family who will fill it with genuine memories. Price negotiable for the right buyers. She attached the photos and hit post. Almost immediately, her phone began to ping. Likes, hearts, inquiries. The algorithmic gods of real estate had blessed her poignant listing. But it was a comment that appeared a few minutes later from a username she didn't recognize that made her stop scrolling. The most honest listing I've ever seen. Congratulations on figuring out what you actually need. Wishing you and your daughter the truest home. Lily read it once, then again. A small, genuine smile touched her lips, the first one that hadn't been an act in a very long time. It wasn't a smile of victory, but of quiet, dawning recognition. She wasn't just cleaning out a room or selling an apartment. She was clearing the stage for a new production, one she would write, direct, and star in, all by herself. The set was gone. Now, she could finally start building the foundation. 5 months after the lock clicked shut on her old life, Lily stood in a patch of morning sunlight, paint smudged on her cheek, surveying her new kingdom. It wasn't a showpiece. It was a sanctuary. The 2-bedroom condo was smaller, older, with a view of a maple-lined street instead of a city skyline. But the light was real. The space was theirs. She had painted the walls herself, a soft, buttery yellow that glowed in the sun. She had wrestled with IKEA instructions to build bookshelves that now stood, slightly crooked but sturdy, against one wall. And on every surface, in mismatched frames from thrift stores, were photographs. Lily and Emma making silly faces. Emma covered in finger paint. Lily, hair in a messy bun, laughing with Maya on a hiking trail. No posed portraits, no forced smiles. Just evidence of a real, unfolding life. "Mama, this one goes here," Emma chirped, holding up a picture book about dinosaurs. Lily lifted her onto a step stool, guiding her small hands to slot the book onto a low shelf they could both reach. As they worked, Emma grew quiet for a moment, her small forehead furrowed in thought. "Mama?" she asked, her voice soft. "Our new home is so pretty. Will Daddy come visit here?" Lily's anime heart didn't clench as it once would have. She felt a wave of calm clarity. She knelt, bringing herself to Emma's eye level, and wrapped her arms around her daughter. The smell of Emma's shampoo, strawberries and sunshine, filled her senses. "Daddy will see you at the park next weekend, just like we planned," Lily said, her voice gentle but firm. "But this house, Sweet Pea, this is our special place, just for you and me. It's a rule. Only real love and honest hearts get to stay here." She tapped Emma's chest lightly. "Like yours." Emma considered this, her serious brown eyes searching her mother's. Then, a smile broke across her face, pure and trusting. She leaned in, planted a wet, smacking kiss on Lily's cheek. "I love you, Mama." The fortress was built, not just of drywall and paint, but of truth. The woman who emerged from the ashes of deception was not just a survivor, she was a force. The mental energy once spent deciphering lies, soothing her own anxiety, and maintaining a fiction was now channeled into her work. Her mind, unclouded by emotional chaos, was sharp, decisive, innovative. She led a critical project team at the marketing firm with a calm authority that inspired confidence. When the campaign launched to resounding success, the promotion to senior project lead wasn't a surprise. It was an inevitability. At the small celebration in a downtown bar, her colleagues toasted her. James from the design team, a quiet man who had always offered insightful feedback without ego, approached her. He held not the expected bouquet of roses, but a vibrant bundle of sunflowers, their faces wide and open, chasing an invisible sun. "For you?" he said, a warm, unassuming smile on his face. "They always turn toward the light. Reminded me of you lately, how you always seem to be moving forward." Lily took the flowers, their bold yellow a shock of joy against her dark blazer. She smelled them, the scent earthy and real. "Thank you, James. That's really kind." She met his gaze, saw the genuine admiration there, free of manipulation or hidden agenda. She smiled back, her heart feeling light and open, a door cracked to a fresh breeze. There was no rush, no desperate need to fill a void. There was just the pleasant possibility of a connection that could grow in the sunlight, not in the shadows. The final scene unfolded on a pristine Saturday morning. The air in the park was crisp, carrying the scent of cut grass and blooming lilacs. Lily, in worn running leggings and a faded university t-shirt, jogged at a slow pace beside Emma, who pedaled furiously on her tiny bike with training wheels, her laughter like bells on the air. "Faster, Mama, I'm winning," Emma yelled. "You sure are, Speed Racer," Lily laughed, the sound easy and free. The golden morning light drenched them, painting their moving figures in warmth. It was a picture of uncomplicated joy. On a weathered wooden bench 100 yards away, partially obscured by a flowering dogwood, Daniel sat. He looked thinner, his posture defeated. He watched them, his eyes tracking Lily's easy strength, Emma's innocent delight. His expression was a complex map of regret, longing, and a hollowed-out shame. He shifted as if to stand, to call out, but his body remained rooted to the bench. The courage, or the audacity, had been leached out of him. Lily, slowing to adjust Emma's helmet strap, caught the movement in her peripheral vision. Her eyes lifted and met his across the green expanse. Her smile didn't vanish, but it settled into something neutral, composed. For a single, suspended second, she held his gaze. Then, she gave one small, deliberate nod. It wasn't a greeting, it was an acknowledgement. A cold, final period at the end of their story. Without another look, she turned her full attention back to the path ahead. She reached down, her hand finding Emma's small one on the bike's handlebar, giving it a firm, reassuring squeeze. "Ready for the big hill, champ?" she asked her daughter. "Ready!" Emma shouted. And together, hand in hand, they moved forward. Lily's strides were long, confident, carrying her away from the bench, away from the ghost on the sidelines, down the sun-dappled path that wound ahead into a future of their own making. She did not look back, not once. The light swallowed them, leaving behind only the impression of two figures, small against the world but immense in their resilience, forever stepping out of the shadows and into the sun.
So this is the end of House Without Wedding Photo Stories. What do you think? I think this is a powerful and beautiful written story. It shows that the real excitement isn't about the betrayal itself, but in the quiet, careful work of rebuilding yourself after you've been broken. Thank you for your listening.